today with Mo Hemmings, who's the Director of Community Outreach at the Atlanta Botanical Garden, and we are talking about growing everything in containers. And in this wonderful urban setting here, you've transformed it into this amazing community garden, and I'm sure it makes so many people in town happy, Mo.
Yeah, downtown's a much better place with a lovely community garden right above a MARTA station, right about an access station. So they literally can come off of the train or hop off the bus, and this is an open space for them to be able to harvest and enjoy the fruits of the labor.
Well, and also in these urban settings, it oftentimes for people, they don't have a good green space to actually learn how to grow.
Yeah, and like here at the 5 Points Farm, so many of the people who farm here, this is their first time ever growing fresh vegetables, fresh herbs, fresh anything. So, you know, and having this community that supports them, here to answer questions, to learn from each other, to exchange plants and seeds from each other, it's a pretty cool thing to do. And then once you get that excitement going, you just never stop, you just keep going.
Well, today we're talking about growing vegetables in containers. And I think for me as a horticulturalist, in the whole sphere of vegetables, there is nothing more satisfying than a fresh, sun-ripened tomato. The tomato is the one that gives you the most love back.
I hear that, but I also have a soft spot for the first time I ever grew corn.
Oh, yes.
In a container.
Really?
Yeah, same kind of happy feeling of like, I grew ears of corn in a container. And
I would never think to put corn in a container.
Yeah, that's the best part about it. One of the tricks to growing any real vegetable in a container is looking for the words dwarf,
right,
mini, patio, container, because that means that the overall green growth of that plant is going to be smaller than your normal, say, indeterminate tomato that just keeps going and going and going, but it doesn't diminish how much harvest you get from your plant.
Right.
So yeah, you're growing a corn, and in your brain you're thinking, oh, this corn stalk is going to be 6 to 8 feet tall. But there are some corns, especially blue and popcorns, that only get to be about 1 foot tall, which is very manageable in a container, which is why, you know, that first time it was like game changer, loved it so much.
People in general don't have these giant estates that they're gardening on. They've got small little areas, or maybe they have only 2 of these and this is their garden.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the vegetables that you're growing here at the 5 Points Farm, and just to give people an idea of, you know, what is possible and what you can do in a container of vegetables.
So right here we've got our peppers, which is another one of those really good container ones. A couple that I really like, if you like a hot pepper, fish is a cultivar that I really love. It is bushy and it makes a stripy green, kind of along the same heat level as a habanero. It's hot, but it definitely has a nice back sweetness to it.
Right.
If you're looking for more of a bell pepper, Sweet 100, it's a yellow bell pepper, so it does turn yellow. A lot of the times with bell peppers, green is what we're used to, but that's just an unripened one, and then you either go red or yellow. This one goes yellow. And I like that one because even though it's not technically a container or a patio one, it takes to pruning really well. So you can clip it to keep it shaped into that pot so it doesn't get too crazy, or maybe you do let it get crazy, but it's still a really good heavy fruiter. I also like to do squash in containers. That's another really good one. And I like doing squash here in containers because it means I can keep an eye on my plant better. Squash does have some pest issues, like your squash vine borer, your Mexican bean beetle, your leaf-footed bugs. But who doesn't love a good summer zucchini, like a nice summer squash? So by putting it in a container, you can contain it, and you can keep it at a level where you can keep your eye on it. So you can kind of meet those pest problems that might come about head on.
Right, that's great. A couple of vegetables that I tried in containers last year that I really liked the results on were the Ikebana eggplant. Of course, it's a wonderful vegetable, but they did great in container, and then also bush beans. And you know, these are little short, compact bushes, but I was shocked at just the amount of food that you can generate in an area this size.
Yeah. Another one I've had really good success with is actually a watermelon. It's an icebox style watermelon, so it means it's smaller fruit, not as heavy. When you're doing something like a vining plant, like a watermelon or a cucumber, if you can't find the bush varieties, having a really stable stake or trellis for it to go up on will help you keep an eye on the fruit and be able to carry the weight of the oncoming fruit and still be able to grow it in a smaller growing area.
Very cool, very cool. I think that when folks start actually gardening in a container or in a small raised bed, which is very similar, of course, it will surprise you just how much you can get out of a little teeny area. You know, this is about right here, maybe about 2 foot by 6 foot. And you can just see the number of peppers that are going to be harvested off this.
Yeah.
It's really impressive.
One thing to keep in mind whenever you're growing anything in a container, it's more so about your depth than how big of a space you can get.
Let's talk a little bit about the correct potting mix for containers, because we don't want to go to the garden center and buy 10 bags of topsoil or something that's not really designed for a container. It will affect our success. And so what are you looking for when you're thinking of the ideal container mix?
My ideal container mix allows for good drainage and air circulation. A lot of the times when we're doing potting soil or just garden soil, topsoil, we don't really think about the fact that air still needs to circulate through that. And in the ground, we have earthworms to help us with that. In a container, not so much. So something that has some vermiculite in it, which is expanded volcanic rock, it's the little white stuff that you see. That's something I look for. I also look for a more soilless mix, so something that isn't labeled as soil, because again, soil can be really heavy, and that heaviness also translates to your container. I imagine if you're growing in a container, you're probably going to try and move it around to find that perfect spacing, and when it's such a heavy soil mix without, say, that expanded vermiculite in it or perlite in it, then it's so much harder to work with for you.
Yeah, and drainage is the key. If in doubt, ask your garden center professional, what should I put in a container? And oftentimes they're labeled, this mix is ideal for containers.
Yeah.
And you'll see the little flecks of white perlite, typically in the image on the bag. But yes, drainage is the key. So that is absolutely important with containers.
Yeah, and speaking to that, if you're growing something that's going to be there for a long time, making sure that your drainage holes that are in your containers aren't blocked. So that it's actually doing its job of helping drain out any excess water and keep that air circulation or airflow going.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mo.
No problem.